Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
I think that starting with Ru's first record deal, because by the time we met, and this was still when, like artists self-releasing was a very new thing and a very niche thing, and only a handful of people had really made it work for themselves.
Right.
And so I think after that first deal and Ru learning, the hard lessons about ownership, and then having him done a television show, it was this combination of having done it long enough, having been savvy enough, and then also knowing where the money is and what your worth is, right? And so that comes back to the thing of your directives, right? So how is it that I want to work? What is important to me? And so I would assume for Ru, ownership was on that list of these are the things that are important to me. So if you're seeking to own the things that I create, we're probably not going to be compatible.
Right.
I would assume that that's what that was. And for me, that was an important, like I knew about like my publishing. I early on, I learned that lesson about retaining my publishing. But these other things are sort of watching somebody sort of, draw a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Was a really great experience. And then we fast forward and look at the empire that Ru has built. It's all contingent on that, is on ownership. So that was a great thing to experience, and it reinforced a lot of things. And I actually took a lot of things from Ru, because I would say one of my biggest things to take from Ru is stepping into authenticity, and to have that moment where I don't care who you are, what your thing is. There is something about all of us inherently that in the system of like you as a commodity, you are led to believe, or you think, or people tell you this aspect of you isn't going to work.
Right.
So we need to change it or obscure it or whatever. And so everybody has some version of that. And sometimes that thing can be crippling, because it could be the thing that is stopping you from your success. And there's another, I'm a big fan of Lisa Nichols, who's a motivational speaker, also from Southern California. And she says, tell your story. Your story is the why people should care about what it is that you're doing, and make that be a part of what it is that you're doing. And I think, I heard that years later, but watching that in action, because there was at that time when we met, I was very much concealing and sort of trying to fit myself into lots of little boxes. And it wasn't until after that working relationship, the beginnings of that working relationship, and watching how high he soared, being 100% who he is, was like, that could be me. You know what? If you don't want to work with me for whatever reason, I'm talented enough that somebody else will. And I think that that's what I took from those beginning experiences with Ru.
Yeah, and that had to have inspired you, right? To have Ru stand up to a production company like that.
I mean, it was one of those things that I experienced in the moment, and it took me a while. At the time, it was probably really more of disappointment.
Oh, sure.
I worked on the stuff, and I wanted this. And in the moment, it was probably more about disappointment than the lesson learned, which comes back to the seats, right? Like sometimes we don't.
Right. Okay. So So you work with RuPaul. At some point, you decide to start. When did you start DJing?
I started DJing. I was part of a production team called the Orange Factory, and we were remixing a lot of records. And I probably started DJing in 2005, maybe. So I did everything backwards. The normal path is like, you're a kid, you start playing records and DJ, then maybe, you start doing remixes, then maybe you become like a, producer and an artist. I did it all backwards. I started out as a singer, then I became a songwriter, then a producer, then a remixer, then a DJ. I did it all the opposite way. I think that my career is probably going to go up a couple of other rungs in the next couple of years, and when I end, I'll be someone's personal assistant. So it's just,
let's go backwards.
It'll just be a cycle, right? I'll be interning like the Robert De Niro film where he's like an intern at 70.
Right.
Like
I just watched that film last night.
It was because of TikTok that I learned about it.
Yeah, and for like the 15th time. I love that. I love that film.
It's a lovely little film.
Absolutely love that film. It's one of my go-tos that I watch.
Yeah. So right? I think I'm on that trajectory.
I love that. That's so cool. So you have some advice.
Sure.
That I think is amazing. First of all, there's two music industries, according to you, traditional major label and then DIY artists. Talk about that for a second.
Sure. Coming back to the thing with Ru and this sort of early pioneering of really just a handful of people that were like self-releasing, right? So at that time, you're looking at maybe what would that have been like 2010,
right?
And at that time, you had people like Ani DeFranco. So there were all these little markers, right? It was like, well, you can put out your own music, but you never sell 1 million copies. And Ani DeFranco, I believe, was the first artist to do that, and she did it, I think, over 2 or 3 albums. And her catalog, about 2 or 3 albums in, she had amassed 1 million record sales, right? So that was sort of the first thing, and it was sort of this slow going thing. And so I don't know exactly when, but in the last couple of years, the model had always been, an independent artist. You're kind of doing this for proof of concept with the idea of that, like, you're getting everything in place and you're building a fan base and you're releasing music as proof of concept so that a major can say, hey, we see what you're doing, and like, we're going to upstream you to the big time. And that was really how it is. But now there are two music industries. There are recording artists that have albums upon albums that are touring, that have, millions of monthly listeners, and they're not coming, and it's a separate industry. And some of them may be turning down major labels. Some of them are, deemed not fit for the major label, machine, or being ignored. And there are these two things happening, and I think a part of that also is through social media and all of these platforms, fame has changed. We had this conversation sort of in the beginnings of like things that we're familiar with, and there was a thing I remember, when you're growing up, there's that expression like, well, if you have to tell somebody who you are, you must not be, you must not really be famous. And that's not true anymore. There used to be one kind of fame. And, you look at, pick a platform, YouTubers or, TikTokers or any of these other things. These people, no, they're not on broadcast television or terrestrial radio or any of these things, but they have millions of fans, and they show up for events and book signings and all manner of things, and hundreds of thousands of people show up. That is fame, baby. And the types of fame now exist, and they're all valid. The whole point of fame, right, is notoriety and opportunity together create these situations. Well, those people have that. And so that the music industry is no different. Yes, still nothing really trumps being on the radio, right? Like having a hit record in the US on major radio stations. There still isn't anything bigger than that. But the artist experience, if you have, millions of monthly streams and an active social media presence that gives you the ability to say, hey, we're coming to not just San Diego, but we're coming to, a small town someplace on the Northeast, and what venue should we play? And you're able to get all of that information and play theaters in all these places, whether it's 200 to 1,000 person capacity, and you're selling that out and people are buying your merch. What's the difference?
Yeah.
What's the difference, right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so that's where, that's where we are right now. And I think that, in the 90s and the early 2000s, the only thing that we had that was similar to that, right, was like sort of that college circuit and the college radio circuit. And, we would know about artists. Like, oh, that was a college artist for like a long time. And then they kind of made it through, and that college thing was still a very viable thing. Well, I think that this new offshoot of the music industry is an example. And I think that the thing for a music creative person to be aware of is that, one, both are valid. Two, how and where do you want to operate in those two systems? Is one an ends to a mean, to do something somewhere else, or are you, or is the end to a mean to have a fan base and sustainable and profitable music projects?
Right.
And I think that that's where we are, and I think that people need to pay attention to that's how things are working on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you also talk about, and this is part of this, right? You also talk about social media and how to be prepared for a viral moment.
Absolutely.
And you say that there are no happy accidents. Talk about that.
I don't know, but did I say there are no happy accidents? We'll come back to that one. But
okay.
The always being prepared thing. So like the thing that people never quite understand about viral moments is, one, you can't construct it, you can't predict it.
Right.
And you cannot shape what it's going to do.
Right.
All you can do is be prepared. But you also have to understand that viral moments very rarely are about you. I'm currently having this moment, and I can tell you exactly why now, after the fact, why it's working. But I didn't go into it that way, and I don't think I could have predicted that.
Right.
And so what happens is this thing sort of takes off, and depending on the shape of how the thing takes off, you have to kind of figure out where you fit into this. And wherever you fit in, the things that people very rarely are prepared for are like, everybody that is operating in any sort of capacity as a creator, you need to have a bio ready to go about yourself. Keep those things updated. You need to have images ready to go. Your social media and all of your platforms need to tell the same story. Whatever it is that you are focusing on, that you are doing, that needs to be present everywhere. You need to have clear and concise ways for people to contact you. And you have to have those objectives. When something happens viral, what is it that you're looking to leverage or get from it realistically, right? You can't just say, well, I'm having this viral moment and I really, I want to be on a sitcom. Okay, depending on what is happening, that may be in or out of the realm of possible things. But even if it's in the realm of possible things, you're probably 8 steps from that. So why don't we focus on the right thing? Maybe the right thing is representation, right? You don't have an agent. So what I'm trying to get from this situation is someone at William Morris or UTA or Endeavor to represent me so that I can get the sitcom or whatever, whatever the thing is. Right. And that informs, because you start getting hit up with tons of things, and like this person, and a lot of times the things that people are approaching you with do not serve you. They serve them. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also a lot of misguided ideas about virality and how people think that they can, hey, you're having this moment. How about we, can you do the same thing, say McDonald's at the end of it?
Mhm.
That's not going to do what you think it's going to do.
Right.
And this is going to be a waste of your and my time. So
Right.
thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
And so, and once again, having those objectives, right, is helpful because that might be a thing where you're like, oh my God, this ad agency is in. No, they're not actually interested in you.
Mhm.
And it's fine to take the job, but ask yourself, is this part of your objective?
Yeah.
Right? Is this something that really is going to help you meet the goal that you want? And so, those are my tips on how to deal with virality is be prepared and then also understand that it is a game of catch up that is nearly impossible. You could only hope for best case scenarios, but it's like a video game where you're running through, whether it's, Super Mario or I don't know the right analogy, but let's say like you're running through like a fruit tree grove and the
Mhm.
fruit are just all there, but you're moving at such a speed and the trees are moving and you're just trying to grab them. You're not going to get all the fruit.
Right.
All you can do is try and get as many as you can that once again, push that directive forward. But understand you're never going to get all of them. You're
Right.
never going to get all of the fruit. Be okay with it. And that would be my advice on how to be prepared for the virality. And like I said, just the mental understanding that you're not. It's a game of catch up that you're never actually going to win.
Yeah. Totally agree. And it's mindset is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So do you mind if I share something with you that's kind of a sensitive thing with me?
Share away.
So there are people that have LinkedIn profiles on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And when you click on their contact info, it's a link back to their profile. That's their contact info.
Yeah.
Back to the profile. Okay.
Yes.
Hello. If you're going to do business on LinkedIn or you're going to do business, period, shouldn't you have your contact information in LinkedIn so that when people click on the contact, okay, I'm just, right?
Yeah.
It drives me
trust
nuts, man.
So part of the things that I, do on social media is I'm really big on advocating for music creatives in lots of little capacities on everything on how to make music to the business, but also the business of doing business, right?
Right.
And one of the things I always say is exactly those things is like it is the music business. So remember that you are interacting with business people.
Right.
So you have to get some of these things straight. And it's like I did a thing kind of similar to that is there is this phenomenon on the internet where people will just be like collab. I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
First of all, in the history of everything, when has that ever worked?
Right.
I think that Mark Ronson made a joke that he did that to Dua Lipa, and he was like, the one time that worked, right? Because you're Mark Ronson, right? That's the joke. But people do this thing where they see somebody somewhere doing well, or is has followers or is famous, and you think that writing collab or collabro with an apostrophe. So that's one of two things. One is, you can't know what you don't know, which is why I try to help people and give people information. But also, there are people that will do minimum effort and wish and hope for maximum outcome. And my whole thing is we don't wish, we work and we prepare.
Right.
And so, I make jokes about it, but my thing's sort of similar to that with the like, it just leads you right back to the contact thing.
Yeah.
You have to be specific. And there's nothing wrong with shooting the shot, but your shot should look something like, hi, I love this thing that you do. I do this. These are my things of valor.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to discuss doing this specific thing with you.
Right.
That's it. But the collab, or just a random series of highs.
Right. Yeah. Please.
So I'm there with you. I'm
Yeah.
there with you.
Yeah. So how to use social media around your production slash creative process. Talk about that for a second.
Sure. Well, first, let's start with the collab. No, just joking.
Right.
So,
Hi.
um, so you know, it's funny because I think that the biggest thing is people have to just try out new mediums, go into it with no expectation, and interact with it and see what makes sense for you. Because what works for somebody else, or
Yeah.
sometimes even a platform's intention behind something, becomes something else because you just don't know what happens when people interact.
Right.
And so, all of the platforms now are really pushing going live.
Hmm.
It's a thing for whatever reason. They all have their particular reasons for why they're pushing this, and people do lots of very different things with lives. And so I had looked at these things and I thought, I don't know what I could possibly do that people would want to look at, and I don't know that I want to like do, like a talk show or whatever. There's all these different ways that
Right.
people interact. And so I said, okay, well let me just start doing this and get over the awkwardness and the weirdness and sort of see how it works and whatever, right? And so what ended up happening for me is that a lot of music production that you do, if you're not working with other people, is quite isolating and a little bit lonely, if we're being honest. And so I started just TikTok, for example, has this dual camera mode where you can utilize the front and back camera at the same time.
Okay.
And so what I do is I, set the phone up in front of my laptop, and I'm in a small, you see my face in a small corner, and the
Hmm.
main screen is my laptop while I'm
Hmm.
working on music. And I just start working. And, what ended up happening for me, like the benefit for me was it feels like people are kind of hanging out with you.
Hmm.
And so it feels a little less lonely.
Yeah.
And so you're working and you're doing the things that are not necessarily, sometimes it's creative, but to make a record, there's lots of parts
Hmm.
that are not creative, that is all technical and
Hmm.
it's time consuming, right? And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, a friend coming over and they're on their laptop behind you, or, sipping coffee or whatever. And that just that energy that comes from people being around you, it's very similar to that. And so that was for me the first benefit. And then the next benefit from that was, at least on TikTok, and like I said, they all are pushing this feature.
Hmm.
They were showing that live stream to people that weren't seeing my other content. And every time I went live, I was picking up new followers, anywhere from 10 new followers to sometimes as high as 75
Oh, wow.
in one live set. Right. And so you're like, oh, and they're seeing your music creation
Yeah.
content. So if you're following me for that, you're gonna like the other stuff,
Yeah.
right? And so that was initially my incentive. But then community started to grow, and I started to see this thing where it could also help inform, just like when you have people hang out, right? Because at a certain point, you can't be objective after a while. You've been working on something for so long. And so I will come on live and I will work. And sometimes, sometimes people offer opinions unsolicited, and sometimes you ask them and somebody would say, like, hey, I really like, what if you use the piano instead of that? Or like, what if you, whatever. And sometimes the ideas are great and sometimes, they're not. And sometimes even the ones that are not are reinforcing why you feel a certain
Yeah.
way or allow you to think about the next step. And I think that it is an extremely powerful tool that has lots of benefits as a creative, as a brand, um, and as somebody that maybe wants to build a community. And I think that there's a lot of boogeymaning with social media. And it's really funny. One of my favorite clips, there are people like, I'm being forced to make content and I just want to make music. And there's also this like Nostalgia is a funny thing, the way that we frame
Mhm.
things, how we tend to remember things. People be like, there was a girl that was like, I don't want to be, it's so awful to have to be on the internet and say blah blah blah, like, and then she references like a really artistic person from like the '80s, and I forgot who it was, who the artist was, and she was like, like, do you think like, like he just made music, like he wouldn't be making TikTok saying, I just made the song of the summer, and I was like, no, but they had to make music videos.
Mhm.
And if you think when music videos came out that they wanted to make them, you're effing wrong.
Mhm.
And there's always a thing. And now everybody wants a music video, which is funny because it's a useless tool for most artists,
Right.
but it's the commonplace. And so everybody still wants it.
Yeah.
And when the music video came out, it was a lot of we're not actors. And my favorite clip, which I keep meaning to do a thing on it, I found this interview years ago, even before we started talking about social media. I found this interview, and I guess it was like in the early '80s. Um, Billboard magazine had some sort of like music summit,
Mhm.
and as it were, on this panel were Hall and Oates, some other act, James Brown, and a 24-year-old Madonna on this panel. And they're, talking about all kinds of things. And the subject of the music video comes in. And here comes John Oates. And he's like, I feel bad for kids that want to be musicians today because we're told now that we have to make these videos and you're going to be told that you have to be like an actor. And man, I got into this industry to make music, not to make videos. And everybody's like clapping their hands. And here comes the 24-year-old. And she says, I actually really like them. I think that it is an extremely exciting time because I'm a new artist
Mhm.
and I don't get to tour in every major city, which means if you live in a suburb someplace, if you don't live in a major city, you're not going to be able to come to one of my concerts and I can't
Mhm.
perform for you. And my music videos allow me to show people a little bit of what it would be like to come to this live performance. And I think that it's extremely useful. And by the way, you're a performer. When you're
Mhm.
on stage, you're not being yourself.
Right.
You're performing. And he starts talking and she goes, you're acting now.
Yeah.
And went on to be, without argument, the largest female pop star of all time, one
Kinda.
of the biggest pop stars, period. And it comes back to the adapting of things, right?
Mhm.
You can take anything. I'm also I think it was Marianne Williamson that says, about social media or technology in general is it's not inherently good or bad. It
Mhm.
is a means of broadcasting and receiving, and you make the decision of what you want to broadcast and what you want to receive.
True.
And I think that that's how we have to look at things, right? And I think that every one of these things is an opportunity, and we can frame it as like, oh, this is the thing. But I'm old enough to remember when people start to complain, and you're like, do you think that Mariah Carey liked doing press tours, the first two or three albums? Do you think she liked being up at 6 a.m. and being asked the same question over and over again and doing a concert and then having to be up at 6 in the morning to do a radio show and the same thing and all of these other things? It's like, it's work, people. There's tons of things to the job that if you want to be successful at it, that you're going to have to do. You don't have to do it, but if you want to be successful in music, because you're more than welcome to just put out music and
Mhm.
whoever finds it and do your shows for however small an audience that is, if that's all you want to do. But that's not what you want to do, so let's have an
Mhm.
honest conversation about that. There
Yeah.
is work. Everybody has to show up and do things that they don't like. And so yeah, that is my I forget the initial question. I may have rambled. My
You're
apologies.
okay. You're okay. There's a lot of wisdom in your answer. And it's incredibly important that people understand. I feel like, especially today, that if you're going to get to where you want to be, you're going to have to do things that other people aren't willing to do.
Absolutely.
It's that simple, right? You've got to be willing to show up. You've got to be willing. Dale Carnegie once said that 85% of success is just showing up. I think it's 100%.
Sure.
I really do.
The addendum,
You've got to show up,
especially when you don't want to.
Yeah. Right. You've got to show up. You've got to get it done, and you got to do it right, like you said, in times when you don't feel like doing it. There are days when you don't necessarily get out of bed and you necessarily want to be doing whatever it is that you're doing. But in order to get to that end result, whatever that is, and that's why you're specific, right? When you make these requests, that's why you're specific. And I can't even tell you how many times I've talked to people who have told me that they got specific. And as soon as they got specific, their entire life changed. Everything changed. And it's not, like one of the most miraculous things that I've heard was the mayor of our former city where we used to live. I actually campaigned for him, and he's in office now. And we had him as a guest on our show. So this mayor of this city, not too long ago, was homeless and a drug addict. And he was in court-ordered rehab. And he went to his mother after 30 days of rehab and said, "I'm going to quit rehab." And he thought that she would blow up at him and kick him out of her house and all this kind of stuff, right? And she said, "Well, may I ask you why?" And so he told her, he said, I've lost all my friends. I don't feel like I'm going forward. I'm not making any progress, all this, right? And she said, "Well, you need to pray tonight. And you need to be specific about what you ask God for." Okay. And he did. And the next day, these missionaries from the Mormon church, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sent him a text message out of the blue next morning. "Hey, we're having a barbecue at a member's house tonight. Would you like to attend?" And all he did was respond yes. Well, it was the first time he'd ever responded to any of their outreach, right? He goes, and one of the things that he said specifically was he told God he wanted friends that wouldn't leave him, so quality people. He wanted friends that were into motocross and into mountain biking. So he goes to this barbecue that night, walks in the door, and on all 4 walls of the front room are motocross posters. Completely changed his life. And today he's the mayor of our city.
Wow.
Okay. Married, 2 beautiful kids. The world is his oyster now, right? But he was specific.
Sure.
It's a big deal, and it's a big lesson that people need to learn.
It absolutely is.
So if people want to contact you, Ellis, how do they go about contacting you?
I am Ellis Miah on almost every conceivable platform. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all of those places. I also have a website, which is ellismiahmusic.com.
Okay.
All correctly spelled, music spelled the normal way.
Miah is M-I-A-H.
M-I-A-H, correct.
M-I-A-H, okay.
And so you can...
And Ellis is the normal spelling, E-A-L-L-I-S.
Yes. Ellis Miah Music is the website, and you can find Ellis Miah on almost any platform, including LinkedIn. And I'm, after this call, going to double check and make sure that my contact information, because it could happen to anybody, right? But we got to stay, we don't wish for success, we plan for it. And so I'm going to make sure that my contact information is correct on LinkedIn.
I haven't visited your LinkedIn, but I really appreciate you, man. Ellis, this has been a blast. I've enjoyed every second of this. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience.
Thank you. And I look forward to hearing it. And thank you again for making the time.
Appreciate you, buddy. Take care.
Okay.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.